Today, we're about to explore the 6 worst amusement park deaths ever recorded. From a fitness trainer standing up mid-ride to capture the perfect picture, to a graduate student deliberately loosening his safety restraint to impress his date, which resulted in a moment that left everyone watching completely horrified. It was July 19th, 2017. An afternoon heat shimmered above the asphalt pathways of a regional amusement park outside Columbus, Ohio. The air smelled of fried dough and chlorine from nearby water attraction as families moved between rides under a cloudless sky. Recorded temperatures that afternoon reached 94 degrees, with humidity adding to the oppressive conditions. Darnell Wickham, 27, worked as a personal fitness trainer at a chain gym, specializing in high-intensity programs and promoting his brand on social media. Standing 6'2" and weighing 185 pounds, he projected an image of physical strength and fearlessness. Friends described him as focused on content creation, often filming workouts and stunts in public to grow his following. That afternoon, Darnell visited the park with 3 friends to film material for his fitness channel. He had announced plans to create an extreme amusement park content and brought a phone in a waterproof case with a wrist strap. The group sought rides, offering dramatic visual, and around 3 p.m., joined the line for a log flume attraction operating since the early 1990s. The ride followed a winding water channel, ending in a steep 52-foot drop at a 45-degree angle, sending fiberglass boats through a splash zone before entering a final canal. Posted regulations and automated announcements required riders to remain seated with hands inside the boat, and attendants repeated these instructions before dispatch. Darnell and his friends boarded a 6-person boat, with Darnell taking the front seat for a clear camera angle. Witnesses later said he planned to stand during the climb to film the descent. Despite friends' concerns, the staff was not alerted as the boat began its ascent. As the boat climbed, Darnell shifted his position and began to stand, gripping the boat's sides while raising his phone. The boat's design featured smooth interior walls with minimal handhold, and its rounded bottom made balance precarious even under stable conditions. Friends later told investigators they saw him fully upright approximately 3/4 of the way up the lift, holding his phone extended ahead of him to capture the approaching drop. The boat crested the lift hill and transitioned onto the drop track. The sudden shift in angle as the boat tipped into the descent caused Darnell to lose his balance immediately. His feet slipped on the wet fiberglass surface as his center of gravity pitched forward. He grabbed for the boat's front edge, attempting to regain stability, but his momentum carried him over the forward lip as the boat accelerated down the flume. Witnesses in boats behind observed Darnell separate from the vessel, approximately 15 feet into the drop. His body struck the concrete flume channel and tumbled violently down the remaining descent, impacting the walls multiple times before reaching the splash pool at the bottom. The force of the impacts was visible to riders approaching from behind and to guests standing in the viewing area adjacent to the ride's finale. Ride operators initiated emergency shutdown procedures within seconds. First responders reached Darnell within minutes. He was lying face down in the shallow water at the base of the flume, unconscious and unresponsive. He was transported to a regional trauma center where medical teams worked for over an hour to stabilize him. He was pronounced dead that evening. The medical examiner determined the cause of death to be severe traumatic brain injury with skull and cervical spine fractures. Investigators reviewed his phone footage, which clearly documented his decision to stand. No equipment malfunction was identified. Darnell's family later settled with the park's insurance carrier. It was April 14th, 2019, when spring sunshine illuminated the steel tracks of a prominent roller coaster at a major theme park outside Orlando, Florida. Mid-morning temperatures approached 78 degrees as crowds filled the pathways during spring break season. The attraction towered above surrounding rides, its red and white track visible throughout the park. Theron Vasquez, 19, was finishing his freshman year at a state university, studying business administration and pledging a fraternity known for high-profile social events. Standing 5'10" and weighing 160 pounds, he had traveled to Florida with 6 fraternity brothers for spring break. Friends described him as eager to gain approval from older members and often willing to take risks to fit in. The group arrived at the park shortly after opening and headed first to a roller coaster featuring multiple inversions and speeds exceeding 65 miles per hour. Theron boarded a middle car with 3 fraternity members, securing his phone before a ride attendant checked his restraint. The ride ended without incident around 10:40 a.m., but while exiting, Theron realized his phone was missing. After searching unsuccessfully, an older fraternity member suggested it had likely fallen onto the track and was probably destroyed, advising him to check lost and found later. Others mocked him for losing the expensive device. Although he initially left with the group, Theron became increasingly upset as they discussed the loss. Near a merchandise stand, he separated from them and returned toward the roller coaster's exit pathway. Instead of re-entering the station, he approached a restricted gate beside the ride, marked with warnings prohibiting entry and cautioning against moving vehicles. Witnesses later reported seeing Theron climb over a 4-foot chain link fence that separated the public walkway from the ride's maintenance area. He dropped down into a landscaped section beneath the track structure and began scanning the ground near one of the ride's support columns. The area was clearly visible from the queue line, and multiple guests noticed him moving through the restricted zone. Several shouted warnings, but he did not respond. The roller coaster operated on a computerized dispatch system that released trains at timed intervals. Theron moved along the ground beneath the track, searching near support footings and landscaped beds. He eventually reached a section where the track swept low to the ground following a banked turn, passing just several feet above the surface before climbing into the next element. Guests in the queue line later described shouting and pointing as another train came through the turn at speed, but the noise made verbal warnings ineffective. Theron appeared to notice the approaching train and moved toward the perimeter fence. As he did, he stepped into the ride's clearance envelope, the 3-dimensional space surrounding the track designated for vehicle passage. The train's outer edge struck him at approximately 55 miles per hour as it swept through the low clearance turn. The collision threw his body approximately 30 feet, where it landed in a planter bed adjacent to the queue line. Ride sensors detected the impact immediately, triggering an automatic emergency stop that halted all trains on the circuit. Guests in the queue screamed, and park security reached the location within minutes. Theron was unresponsive with catastrophic injuries visible to witnesses before security personnel established barriers and cleared the area. Paramedics pronounced him dead at the scene. The medical examiner determined the cause of death to be massive blunt force trauma, with injuries including skull fractures, complete spinal cord transection, and extensive internal organ damage. Park surveillance footage reviewed by investigators confirmed Theron had entered the restricted area independently and without authorization. His fraternity brothers provided statements confirming his phone had been lost during the ride. The park later installed additional fencing and surveillance systems around the ride's perimeter, and warning announcements were added to the queue line addressing the dangers of track intrusion. It was August 6th, 2016, and heat waves rose from concrete pathways at a water park in suburban Phoenix, Arizona. Afternoon temperatures exceeded 105 degrees as families moved between attractions under a relentless sun. The sound of rushing water and screaming riders echoed across the facility as lifeguards rotated positions to avoid heat exhaustion. Leighton Cardwell, 33, worked as a pharmaceutical sales representative who traveled throughout the Southwest meeting medical practices and hospitals. Colleagues saw him as outgoing and polished, but intensely private. Unknown to them, he had concealed a severe water-related anxiety disorder since childhood, caused by a near-drowning incident at age 7. He avoided pools and beaches and had never learned to swim beyond basic floating in shallow water. That Saturday afternoon, Leighton attended a mandatory corporate team-building event at a water park with about 40 employees. Though he considered declining, he feared his absence might affect upcoming performance evaluations. The group first visited wave pools and a lazy river, where he remained in shallow areas without drawing attention. Around 2 p.m., several colleagues chose a waterslide tower with 4 configurations. The facility's design routed 3 of the 4 slides into a shared 9-foot-deep landing pool with no shallow section, and rapid dispatch intervals during peak hour meant riders entered the water in close succession. Leighton's supervisor encouraged everyone to ride together as a bonding activity. When he hesitated, explaining he preferred shallow attractions, colleagues pressured him, and his supervisor insisted on participation. Facing mounting pressure, Leighton agreed without revealing his inability to swim confidently. The group climbed the tower, and Leighton chose a steep body slide designed to drop riders directly into a deep landing pool. After a brief safety check at the dispatch platform, he descended through several turns before a final straightaway that launched riders into the landing pool. Leighton descended the slide as instructed. Multiple witnesses later described seeing him exit the slide and enter the pool, submerging completely beneath the surface before bobbing upward. Instead of swimming toward the pool's edge, he remained in place, his movements becoming erratic and uncoordinated. Lifeguards later reported that he appeared to be struggling within 5 seconds of surfacing. The landing pool was congested, with riders exiting slides in rapid succession, creating challenging visibility conditions for the 2 lifeguards monitoring the space. One lifeguard noticed Leighton's distress approximately 10 seconds after he surfaced and immediately entered the water. By the time the lifeguard reached him, Leighton had submerged again and was no longer visible at the surface. The lifeguard dove repeatedly, locating Leighton on the pool's bottom after approximately 20 seconds. He was pulled to the pool's edge, where additional staff initiated resuscitation efforts immediately. Paramedics arrived within 12 minutes and continued advanced life support, but Leighton did not regain consciousness. He was transported to a nearby hospital, where he was pronounced dead roughly 40 minutes after arrival. The medical examiner determined the cause of death to be drowning with associated hypoxic brain injury. Toxicology results showed no alcohol or impairing substances. Investigators later interviewed Leighton's family, who disclosed his long-standing fear of water and inability to swim. His employer faced a wrongful death lawsuit filed by his family, which was settled confidentially. The water park subsequently revised its policies, adding mandatory life jacket availability for deep water slide complexes and increasing lifeguard staffing and surveillance systems at high-traffic landing pool. It was September 19, 2015, at a county fairground outside Lincoln, Nebraska, where a traveling carnival filled the grounds with spinning rides, diesel generators, and evening crowds moving between booths under string lights. Sienna Palmieri, 21, worked as a shift supervisor at a retail clothing store in a regional shopping mall. Standing 4'11" and weighing about 95 pounds, her petite build had long been a source of insecurity. Friends described her as outgoing but sensitive about her size, often resisting suggestions that certain activities might not suit her stature. That Saturday evening, Sienna attended the fair with her boyfriend of 8 months and several of his longtime friends, most of whom she had only recently met. After spending the afternoon visiting livestock exhibits and playing midway games, the group turned to the carnival rides as night fell. Around 7:30 p.m., they approached a pendulum swing ride near the fair's main entrance. The pendulum ride used a 60-foot mechanical arm that swung riders in wide arcs to heights of about 70 feet, with outward-facing seats secured by over-shoulder restraints and lap bars. Posted signs required a minimum height of 52 inches and warned that the restraints were designed for average adult builds. During loading, the operator hesitated at Sienna's small frame and warned the restraints might not secure her properly, suggesting she sit out. Sienna's boyfriend insisted she would be fine, and others supported him, calling the concern unnecessary. Facing pressure from the group, and a growing line. The operator relented and directed her to a seat near the center. The restraint system consisted of a padded over-shoulder harness that lowered from above and a secondary lap bar that locked across the rider's thighs. The design assumed riders would fill the seat adequately to create secure contact points. When the operator lowered Sienna's harness, visible gaps remained between the padding and her shoulder. The lap bar similarly rested several inches above her thigh. The operator adjusted the restraints to their tightest setting, but could not eliminate the gaps. He paused, then asked Sienna if she felt secure. She insisted she was fine and that the restraints felt tight enough. The operator later told investigators he had voiced concern a second time, but ultimately started the ride after other guests began complaining about the delay. The pendulum began swinging, gradually increasing its arc over several cycles. For the first 30 seconds, Sienna appeared stable in her seat. As the swing's amplitude increased and the arm approached its maximum arc, the forces acting on riders intensified. Witnesses later reported that Sienna's body began shifting within the restraints during the third or fourth full swing. The gaps between her small frame and the padded harness allowed upward movement at the swing's apex, where brief weightlessness reduced the pressure holding her in the seat. On the fifth swing, as the arm reached its highest point, Sienna slipped upward through the gap between the harness and lap bar. Her body separated from the seat entirely and fell approximately 70 feet, striking the fairground pavement near the ride's perimeter fence. Screams erupted from riders and spectators as the operator immediately initiated an emergency stop. The pendulum continued through several diminishing arcs before coming to rest. Carnival staff and fairground security reached Sienna within moments. She was unresponsive and not breathing. Paramedics arrived within 10 minutes and found her pulseless, with injuries incompatible with survival. She was pronounced dead at the scene. The medical examiner ruled the cause of death massive blunt force trauma, including skull fracture, spinal injury, and organ rupture. Investigators found the ride had passed mechanical inspections, but the operator failed to follow guidelines on rider size and restraint fit. The company received citations and suspended operations, and Sienna's family secured a settlement that prompted stricter operator training and enforcement of size restrictions. It was June 22, 2019, when a warm coastal breeze carried the smell of ocean water across a boardwalk amusement park in Santa Cruz, California. Early evening crowds moved along the wooden planks between game booths and ride entrances as the sun descended toward the Pacific horizon. Music from competing sound systems created overlapping noise across the park. Brecken Holloway was 24 years old and pursuing a master's degree in business administration at a university in the Bay Area. Friends described him as competitive and image-focused, someone who frequently positioned himself as fearless and willing to take risks others avoided. That evening, he attended the park on a third date with a woman he had met through a professional networking event, and he had spent much of the evening attempting to impress her with displays of confidence and disregard for minor rules. Around 7 in the evening, the pair approached a Scrambler ride positioned near the boardwalk center. The attraction consisted of rotating arms that spun individual cars in overlapping circular patterns, creating disorienting motion through the combination of the platform's rotation and each arm's independent spinning. Riders sat in two-person cars, equipped with a single lap bar that lowered across both occupants. Brecken and his date boarded one of the cars, and a ride attendant checked the lap bar before starting the ride. As the ride began, Brecken made a show of pushing the lap bar upward slightly, demonstrating to his date that it had some play in the locked position. He joked that the ride was barely holding them in and that he could easily slip out if he wanted to. His date later told investigators she had laughed uncomfortably, but asked him not to touch the restraint. As the Scrambler accelerated and the spinning intensified, Brecken continued manipulating the lap bar. Witnesses in adjacent cars later reported seeing him deliberately lift the bar several inches, creating a visible gap between the restraint and his lap. His date reached over and attempted to push the bar back down, but he blocked her hand and made a comment about proving the ride was safe even without it. The Scrambler's motion generated significant centrifugal force, particularly during moments when individual cars swung outward while the platform rotated at high speed. Approximately 90 seconds into the ride's cycle, Brecken's car entered a high-speed rotation while positioned at the outer edge of the platform. The combination of forces pulled his body toward the car's open side, where the lifted lap bar provided insufficient restraint. His torso slid toward the edge, and he grabbed the car's interior frame, attempting to brace himself. The motion continued, and his grip failed as the forces exceeded his ability to hold on. His body was pulled from the car and flung outward tangentially, striking one of the ride's steel support arms as centrifugal force carried him beyond the car's arc. The impact redirected his body clear of the ride's footprint, and he landed on the pavement adjacent to the attraction's perimeter. The operator, alerted by screaming from riders, initiated an emergency stop immediately. The ride's deceleration took approximately 15 seconds, during which the remaining cars continued their rotation until the platform came to rest. Park staff reached him within moments and found him unresponsive with severe injuries. Paramedics arrived within 7 minutes, but determined the injuries were unsurvivable, and he was pronounced dead at the scene. The medical examiner cited severe traumatic brain injury and cervical spine trauma from impact with the ride's support structure. Investigators confirmed he had deliberately lifted the lap bar, supported by witness statements and security footage. The park faced no liability, and his family declined legal action. Tamper-evident restraint systems were later installed. It was October 13th, 2018, and cool evening air drifted across a pier amusement park extending over the Atlantic Ocean near Wildwood, New Jersey. The smell of salt water mixed with boardwalk food as colored lights reflected off dark waves below. Crowds had thinned following the summer season, but weekend visitors still filled the pier's attractions. Colette Brennan was 51 years old and worked as a commercial real estate broker in the Philadelphia metro area, managing a portfolio of high-value clients on a schedule that regularly exceeded 60 hours per week. Family later described her as driven but increasingly stubborn about addressing recent medical symptoms. Over the previous 6 weeks, she had experienced intermittent severe headaches and vision disturbances, but postponed seeing a physician, attributing the symptoms to stress and lack of sleep. That Saturday evening marked a family celebration for her daughter's engagement, with roughly 12 relatives gathering at the pier for dinner and rides. Her son's 3 children, ages 4 through 8, were among the group. Despite a dull headache that afternoon, Colette had taken over-the-counter pain medication and insisted on joining fully. Around 7:30, the grandchildren asked to ride a classic spinning teacup attraction near the pier's midpoint. The ride featured oversized cup-shaped vehicles on a rotating platform, each capable of independent spinning via a central wheel. The combined motion created disorienting circular movement. Posted signage warned guests with heart conditions, high blood pressure, or neurological issues to avoid the attraction. Colette's daughter read the warnings aloud and suggested her mother sit out, citing her recent headaches. Colette dismissed the concern and climbed into a cup with her 3 grandchildren, settling the youngest beside her as the operator reminded riders to stay seated individually. The ride began with gentle rotation as the platform accelerated gradually. The children immediately grabbed the central wheel and began spinning the cup aggressively, laughing as the motion intensified. Colette smiled initially, but witnesses in adjacent cups later reported that her expression changed noticeably within the first 30 seconds of the ride. Her face appeared to tense, and she closed her eyes while gripping the cup's edge. Approximately 1 minute into the 2.5-minute ride cycle, Colette's head tilted backward against the cup's interior wall. Her grip on the edge loosened, and her body began to slump. The oldest grandchild stopped spinning the wheel and called to her repeatedly, but she did not respond. As the platform continued rotating, other riders noticed and began signaling to the operator. The operator reduced speed and brought the ride to a stop within 15 seconds. but the gradual deceleration required by safety protocols meant the platform completed nearly a full additional rotation before halting. Family members rushed to the cup and found Colette unconscious, her breathing shallow and irregular. The grandchildren were removed immediately, and emergency services were contacted. Paramedics arrived within minutes and found Colette unresponsive with fixed, dilated pupils. She was transported to a nearby medical center where imaging revealed a massive subarachnoid hemorrhage caused by a ruptured cerebral aneurysm. Neurosurgeons determined the damage was catastrophic and non-survivable. The medical examiner concluded that Colette had likely harbored an undiagnosed aneurysm for months or years, with her recent headaches representing warning episodes of minor bleeding. The ride's spinning motion and G-forces triggered the fatal rupture. Her family later established a scholarship fund in her name promoting health awareness. Thanks for watching. If you like these stories, click here.